Welcome to the third episode of the Dog Pound Daily Podcast. I am Stephen Kibitza. I am once again joined by site contributor Andrew Siped. Andrew, before we get into all the craziness of the past week, I want to ask an important question. How is your Beagle puppy doing today?
He's doing fantastic. He's actually right now passed out on the couch, and I'm hoping that he doesn't bother me for the remainder of this podcast.
I know he's passed out, and let's segue. A lot of people felt very overwhelmed. Segues are hard. Felt very overwhelmed throughout the past week. I know when free agency began, maybe we thought, oh, it's going to be about Terrelle Pryor. It's going to be, maybe they'll make a crazy trade. But the first day, it was rapid fire. I actually got most of my updates from you calling me in a frenzy. Let's talk about the craziest thing right away, the Brock Osweiler trade. What was your initial reaction before you knew all the details?
My initial reaction was crazy. I was like, no freaking way it's real. Like, there's no way that actually happened. And I was pretty stunned. And then as the trade details became available, it was a lot easier to see that this is actually a trade that was done more in the NBA than something that's done in the NFL, which to me, it just proves DePodesta's role in the front office.
Yeah, it was something that's never been done before in the NFL. So I think a lot of people, once the details came out and you got over the initial shock of, oh no, the Browns just got Brock Osweiler. It was a very smart deal, but just that initial reaction was very terrifying because everyone's scared about the team maybe reaching on a quarterback in the draft, but trading for someone not only with Osweiler's contract but his lack of skills as an NFL quarterback was absolutely terrifying. But as you said, turned out to be a good thing.
Well, he looks like a newborn giraffe trying to play quarterback. He's 6'7" and can't really throw the ball anywhere. I had him on my fantasy team in one of them, and he was a short-lived fantasy option. That's for darn sure.
He can't really. I don't know. He hasn't really played much, but when he did play, especially with the Texans when he was given full-time role, he couldn't even be a Brown starting quarterback, and that's saying a lot after RG3 began the year last year as a starter.
They went. He's 13-8 as a starter, I believe. So I think he's a little bit jaded because he's back behind two very, very good defenses in the Broncos and the Texans. So it's proven that he can win, but he's got to have that elite defense behind him in order to do that. And you look at the Browns compared to the Texans, and that talent's not there. So I don't know how the Browns. I get if you want to bring him into OTAs or something, but I have a hard time believing that the Browns are going to somehow bring him into OTAs or training camp as some sort of viable option.
Yeah, I can't imagine him even showing up in Cleveland because they might just release him. With the draft, it's about 5-6 weeks now until the draft. He might not even be on the roster by then because they're trying to swing a trade, but the trade market's kind of gone silent. But that's just to the public. We don't know. They could be talking
you never
to
know. Someone
Jets.
Could get hurt. It depends on what Cutler does. Cutler could retire. I know there have been rumblings that he might go to the Jets, and the free agent market's kind of washed up. So if you're a team looking to draft a quarterback and none of these guys in the draft really being an option that can come in and play right away from most of the perspectives, Brock Osweiler gives you that option. So that's where the Browns could feasibly use him, but I don't know. I couldn't fathom.
But do you think they can connive away into trading a team Brock Osweiler? Because if the Browns don't want him to start for a year, the worst team in the NFL last year doesn't want him to start, why would another team even take on half of his contract just for a year?
It's the Browns eating most of that contract, so I wouldn't be too upset about it. It's a little bit easier for a team to stomach an $8 million contract as a backup.
But who wants him to come in and Exactly. It would have to be a team that's trying to tank like the Jets.
Yeah, and you never know. His salary's off the books next year, and for the Browns, they'll probably just cut him, so it's not really a huge deal. But I have a hard time seeing a team taking on that contract as well as the talent, to be honest.
So that was the most high-profile move, although it's one that is more for the draft picks that we got as opposed to, a new quarterback in town. But with the rest of the moves, how would you grade just the overall, I guess it was mostly just the first day of free agency, but how would you grade the acquisitions that the Browns got?
I think Zeitler and Treader, obviously solid offensive line options. I mean, if you look at the offensive line, wasn't terrible. It was riddled by injuries, but I mean, you're really putting a lot of investment into the offensive line, which is something that benefits not only the quarterback but the running game as well. Gives you the ability to control the game a little bit more than what the Browns were able to do last year. So I think it's definitely an A or B plus grade in terms of those two guys. I don't know too much about Treader, but Zeitler was obviously the number one lineman coming into the offseason. Kenny Britt, I think he's a solid receiver. He's a veteran. He's been around for a long time, but he's got the same numbers as Pryor, and I'm not expecting him to replace Pryor, but just gives you more of that reliable number 2 option behind Corey Coleman.
Yeah, and with starting off with the offensive lineman, they also extended Joel Platonio, so it was clear that while the fans screamed, build the line, they're doing it. They seem set because now they have those 11 draft picks to either trade or focus mainly on the defense. So they took care of that build the line.
Thank God. End the argument. If
they built the line,
draft a dang quarterback now. The line is built. Draft a quarterback. They now have a better offensive line than 95% of the teams in the league. So there's no room for that argument anymore. You need to take a quarterback. You need to go after whether it's Kirk Cousins, Jimmy Garoppolo, Mitchell Trubisky, Deshaun Watson, the Peterman guy from Pitt, literally anybody. Put him back there and let's move on.
So we're gonna get to the quarterbacks soon, as that is our favorite topic of conversation. But first, I want to get back with Pryor. Would you say that getting Britt, kind of we don't want to say he's replacing him, but just in the sense of Pryor's out, Britt's in, do you think it's just a lateral move that we're going to get the same production, basically what Pryor was giving? It's not, because I think a lot of people get caught up in, Pryor, and let's just take it at like an arbitration style meeting. For Pryor, he had a 1,000-yard season. Some stats may be inflated because the team was losing in most of the games. And he, 1,000 yards for a Browns receiver is really cool and very rare. But, with Britt getting 1,000 yards kind of on the Rams team, that was also very bad. Is it just kind of swapping out an average guy for another average guy? Or do you think it's really going to be a major issue that they lost Pryor on, in offense next year?
I obviously think it'll hurt. I think you lose kind of that explosive playability. I know there were a couple plays last year that even though the Browns didn't have a quarterback healthy enough to really utilize the downfield game or have enough time to do that, you lose kind of that explosive playability. But Britt, like I said, brings that possession receiver, just kind of that bulldog almost that he's going to go across the middle, take some hits, but he's going to hang on to the ball and hopefully have a quarterback there that's going to put him in favorable situations to succeed. With Pryor, like I said, you get more of the explosiveness and you have more upside because I think what Britt is now is kind of his upside. You're really not. He's not going to be a 1,200-yard receiver. He's not going to be like that elite guy. I think I would compare him to almost a Mohamed Sanu, or Mohamed Sanu is like a Kenny Britt, that valuable number 2 receiver that when you have your number 1 option, he's that go-to guy afterward to exploit the defense.
And that's what Coleman's brought in to do, be that number 1 guy. So with Britt coming in, I don't think they expect Britt to be this dominant receiver. And I think some fans look at Pryor as that, big-time player. But the whole point of taking Corey Coleman last year was to be the number 1. So essentially they went into the offseason saying, we already have our number 1 receiver. Do we really need to break the bank to keep Pryor? Although, they gave him a fair offer.
I don't think it was a breaking the bank thing with Pryor. I think it was just the nature of the NFL and free agency and the business side of things. So, in my opinion, I look at the Terrelle Pryor situation and say, all right, Browns probably, let's assume they gave him the Kenny Britt deal. So, their Browns are offering 4 years, $32 million, 16 guaranteed. If I'm Terrelle Pryor, as much as I love having him as a player, you look at the business side and say, well, I'm just scratching the surface as an NFL receiver. If I sign for 4 years, that means they've locked me up for 3 years, and I would be hard pressed to say that Terrelle Pryor is probably going to be a 1,200-yard receiver, and maybe more. He's huge, he's fast. The guy's got almost unlimited potential.
And Washington lost a lot of their talent, so he's going to be probably one of the main targets. So he could easily get that number, especially with Kirk Cousins if he's still there next year.
Exactly. So I think Pryor really wanted that 1-year deal or something along those lines, and the Browns weren't necessarily willing to deal with that. So it was more of like go. The Browns said, you turned down our offer, go test the market, see what you can get. And when he came back with a number lower than what the Browns offered, they reduced their offer, as any good business would. I mean, basically how negotiations work is that when an offer is presented, if you turn down that offer, that's it. The offer's off the in most situations, the offer's off the table. So as soon as if you counter offer, that initial offer is off the table. So for Terrelle Pryor, he kind of overplayed his hand. The Rosenhauses overplayed their hand as well. I think he truly does want to be in Cleveland, but it was a thing that just got caught up in the business side of things that enabled him to walk.
If he's just on a 1-year deal with the Redskins, he can always come back to Cleveland in 2018. They're going to have a lot of cap space. And if if it's just Coleman and Britt and the other 3 guys they drafted last year are just not getting it done, they can still go out and get Pryor. I don't think anyone would have an issue with that. And if Kirk Cousins tries to leave the Redskins because they're not going to tag him for $34 million again, if he leaves and Pryor says, hey, I got a chance to go back to Cleveland, they have a legitimate quarterback and a system I'm familiar with, I don't think any fans would have a problem with that, and the front office would give him a fair deal. Given he doesn't have a crazy year this year, and his value is just way too high.
Yeah. Speaking of Kirk Cousins, recent rumors have circulated about the Browns making a run at Kirk Cousins. Is that something that you would be interested in doing?
I don't know. We just had an article go up on the site here on Wednesday. One of our writers, Damon, said he doesn't buy it. He thinks that it's just all fluff. It's the media kind of throwing it out there like, oh, there's an unnamed source. Although unnamed sources are legit. I'm not saying it because sometimes you just can't name the person. But there was just kind of this fighting going on between different outlets of saying, oh, it's not legit. It is legit.
Well, it's just easy to connect the dots between like Kirk Cousins. Like a lot of teams can't pay what Kirk Cousins wants, or the Redskins aren't willing to do it, and the Browns have.
Yeah, and what does pursuing really mean? It could be the Browns called. Although I don't know who's there to answer the phone in Washington currently after they fired their GM.
Definitely not Scott McLuhan.
But yeah, I think I would like them to do it. Obviously, given they cut Osweiler, so we don't have $50 million invested in the 2 quarterbacks. But given they cut Osweiler, I'd be fine with it. And if he has a good year, they're going to make him their franchise guy, and he would be in a better situation. And as crazy as it sounds, Washington is far more toxic as an organization than the Browns. And if he came here, had a good year, they'd keep him. I couldn't see him. There's not many open quarterback spots to go to.
Oh, there's plenty. Trust me.
Yeah. So
maybe not ones that are willing to pay what he wants or have the draft capital to do it. But if I'm the Browns, I'm giving up 12 and even 2 second-rounders next year, maybe a first. I don't care. If you can land Kirk Cousins, even if it's for 2 years. So you have this year he's tagged at $28 million. Even next year, if you want to transition tag him,
he's 23.94. Just to clarify.
What did I say? Oh, okay.
I don't want you to know.
Either way,
overvalue Kirk Cousins based on his already ludicrous deal.
Yeah. And the Washington doesn't do anyone any favors. Like, what happens if he hits the market, and no one pays what he wants? Then the market settles, obviously. But back to my original point, if you're the Browns, I think you got to go after this guy. He provides even better than Jimmy Garoppolo. He's proven it. He can do it at this level. 68% completion percentage over the last 2 years, 4,500 yards, averaging only 11 interceptions, and I believe around 30 touchdowns. And I'm not sure officially on that number, but man, those are some franchise quarterback numbers.
Yeah, the thing with Kirk,
I would gladly give up 12.
Calling him Kirk first name basis here. The thing I like with him is that I think a lot of fans he's a legit NFL starting quarterback, took a team to the playoffs. He's not a backup, and he was a backup behind RG3, but he was kind of drafted to be the starter there eventually. That was very suspect when they did that. You knew RG3 wasn't going to last long. But I think I would love to have him here. I think a lot of fans would, even for the money, because they have still over, I believe, around $67 million left, and the draft picks aren't going to cost that much. I'd be happy with it. What % likelihood do you think Kirk Cousins is a starting quarterback for the Browns in 2017? I want to go straight up game show segment here. % likelihood he's the starting quarterback.
I'd say under 10. I just don't think Washington's going to trade him. The Browns, you could blow them away with whatever you want, but teams don't let franchise quarterbacks leave. And I know Washington and especially Cleveland are an exception to that because of just the recent toxicity in the franchises. But if you're Washington, I mean, Bruce Allen's a whole different segment we could go on about Bruce Allen, but they're just not going to let a franchise quarterback walk like that. It's crazy that they won't just give him a contract, give him the money and a contract extension, because these quarterbacks don't grow on trees, as we well know. I just don't see the Browns. I think they're kind of using it as leverage against the Patriots to say, hey, well, if you're not going to trade us Garoppolo, then screw it. We'll go after Cousins.
So do you think that there is no interest in Cousins and they're just using it as leverage against the Patriots? Or do you think they actually, they are pursuing Cousins with the knowledge that it will, cause some, maybe the value of Garoppolo to go down?
They should have real interest in him. I mean, any viable option at quarterback that the Browns could get, they should be on top making calls. Whatever they can do to get that franchise quarterback, they should be on the phone doing it. And I'm sure they are, but there was a recent report, I believe, by Mary Kay saying that 3 teams had already inquired about Kirk Cousins and were immediately shot down. So it's just things like that the Browns can reach out, but how willing is Washington really going to be in trading?
Yeah, probably. I mean, to get Kirk, it would take probably the number 1 pick and more.
You think so? Would you do it?
It's tough because draft picks are valued so highly. The number 1 pick, it's the potential. The potential outweighs.
Oh, it's the fascination of the unknown, man. The unknown
outweighs the current talent.
I'm guilty of it. Yeah, I'm guilty of it. I love the draft. I mean, the draft, the unknown, the ability to potentially find the next Khalil Mack, the next Odell Beckham. For the Browns, they just whiffed on so many picks that you're just waiting for that one guy that they can get to be that guy. And I think Myles Garrett's going to be that guy. It's a no-brainer at number 1. But you also look at the Houston Texans, and if you're the Houston Texans, would you trade J.J. Watt for Kirk Cousins?
Oh, they totally would.
No-brainer. Yeah. I mean, it's that type of argument. I get you want Myles Garrett, but you got to look at you need a franchise quarterback, and you're only going to go so far with your defense. There's not a single team in the Super Bowl or in contention for the Super Bowl that's defensive-minded. They may have great defenses, but they're led by
there's always a good quarterback
with a stud quarterback. Exactly. There's no team in the Super Bowl without it. I mean, you have your obvious
Rex Grossman's, but even he played a solid year. Exactly. He wasn't out there like playing like Osweiler.
Yep.
You can't go 14-2 with a horrible quarterback like they did that year.
Yep.
I don't know how I remember their record from that year. I just do.
That was 2008, right?
I'm not sure the year, but I know that was their record. Big Bears fan under Rex Grossman.
Very, very obscure sports stats from 8 to 10 years ago is what we specialize in here.
Yeah, I remember Rex Grossman. That Week 7 matchup was crazy. Yeah, I think our view of we want Cousins directly opposes the view in the Browns front office, which is building through the draft. And it makes sense. They say, hey, we have 11 picks this year, and they have so many next year, too, early on. They're not going to make any drastic moves until at least 2019, probably.
But you've had so many young players on that roster last year. I believe it was 40 out of 74 on their roster right now have accrued at least a year or less of NFL experience, which is absolutely mind-boggling. I think that's the most by far of an NFL team in NFL history. You cannot bring 11 more rookies over. What is that? 22 rookies over the next 2 years into this franchise. At some point, and these free agents that they brought in are exactly the kind of guys that I wanted. Guys coming off their rookie deals that are looking to get paid, that prove that they're established talent in the NFL. Similar to Jamie Collins, the Browns did I think that's the perfect move that they need to keep making in getting guys that teams are either not willing to pay or just kind of moving on from due to whether it's coaching change, regime change. Tremaine Johnson, another name that comes to mind. I mean, you've got all these second-round picks. Go take a stab at a guy like that. Pay him a little bit of money, but Malcolm Butler and the Patriots, package him and Jimmy Garoppolo together. We have the money to pay Malcolm Butler. Cornerback's a position of need. Go after some of these guys with all these draft picks because you can't bring in 11 new rookies. You need some veterans at some point.
The stockpiling of picks seems to be, I mean, it obviously allows them to make these monster trades where they just package a bunch of picks in. But it seems to be that's part of the strategy as well. They're just not going to come out and say it. They're not going to come out and say, oh, yeah, we're shopping our second-round picks, our third-round picks, even the first-round picks. They're not going to say it to the media. But, I mean, I'm sure teams know around the league. I'm sure the Browns have called, and they've told everyone, hey, these picks are up if you have like for Kirk Cousins or for Garoppolo. We'll give you the 12 for Garoppolo, and it's just hard for the fans to know because it's so tough to trust what's coming out because it changes on an hourly basis. But it does seem that those picks are held in an effort to use them to acquire not only a quarterback, it can be just any. I mean, it's like how they got Jamie Collins last year. It could just be to acquire any star, and that could even happen during the season. So I think I'm not saying you are, but just to get upset and say, oh, we have all these picks, we're going to have all these rookies. They might say, hey, we're going to bring in rookies, but maybe we'll cut them and then say, oh, we're going to use this pick to bring in a guy as an upgrade, trading a second rounder for him.
If you're gonna draft a rookie and then cut him, like what?
Well, I mean, you're giving a guy a tryout. I don't mean draft him and cut him right away, but
no, if you're drafting a guy, there should be no reason. I mean, Farmer drafted Vince Mayo in the 4th round, and he didn't even make the team. Like that guy's not even. He might be on a practice.
I believe he was on the Cowboys last year.
You can't do that. You cannot bring in guys and then cut them. I think there was one guy last year who's now on our practice squad that was out of that draft class that in the 2016 draft class for the Browns. But if you're going to spend money on drafting a guy and spend this quote unquote draft capital that we've been so good to acquire, been so hard to acquire over the last 2 years, you can't bring in a guy like that and then cut him. Trade it, package that pick. Again, it's the fear or the fascination of the unknown. You're drafting this guy, and you find out that he stinks, but you could have done that, could have used that pick to trade and find somebody else who's already a known commodity or an established talent in the NFL. I'm not saying it's like no one's going to trade a 7th rounder for a valuable player. Those picks are usually used for trading up, trading down in the draft. But a 3rd round guy, I mean, what's the difference between drafting a guy in the 3rd round versus
kind of like the Jamar Taylor situation?
Yep.
You get a several year starter who they extended by. I think that's even a smarter strategy. Is they have so many picks. You have like a 3rd round pick and say, hey, instead of drafting this project defensive back, let's just trade for this mid-level guy who this team's willing to shop.
Yeah, I mean, Hugh Jackson was in Oakland. They had guys that they liked in Oakland that maybe Reggie McKenzie didn't like, or there's always guys that coaches like but don't either have the opportunity to draft or the team doesn't even have an opportunity to draft. So there's always guys around the league that coaches have that fit their system. So if you see a draft pick that maybe the guy that you don't want is in the 3rd round is there, so offer it to a team and say, we'll package it with another pick next year and go get that guy. I don't know what type of player that might be, but Jamar Taylor is a great example of that. So I just more trades like that can really infuse the roster with some veteran talent that's been needed after all these draft picks over the last 5 years. 1st round picks have failed.
So continuing on with the draft, just want to ask you a quick question. Do you think that there is any chance Myles Garrett won't be a Brown in 2017? Whether that be they don't just flat out don't take him or they trade the pick?
Oh, they're taking Myles Garrett. I think it's a no-brainer. As much as I love Kirk Cousins, I don't, and as much as I want a franchise quarterback, I don't think they're going to trade it. It doesn't make sense to trade it because you have number 12 as an insurance policy. Plus, none of these quarterbacks really jump off the page, which is a good thing because maybe Myles Garrett helped temper those rise up the draft boards like you normally see with these quarterbacks after the combine. Myles Garrett definitely put those to rest, and he's going to be a Brown for a long time.
And with Garrett, a lot of fans may get caught up and say, oh, I want a quarterback or I want this. But I'm talking about at number 1.
No, I mean, if there was a guy like I would totally take the quarterback over Myles Garrett. And it's weird to say, but You just gotta find the guy, and everyone wants to wait till next year. And I get it. You see all the. It's again fascination of the unknown. Last year it was all let's go for tank for Deshaun Watson. He's going to be the guy. Now we're back here, and Deshaun Watson, yeah, he might be the guy, but he's not the number one pick, which quarterbacks tend to be at those positions. He's not a Matt Stafford who, I'd take Matt Stafford 10 out of 10 times at number one. So you look at everyone's looking forward to next year. Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen. I mean, yeah, those guys look great now, but when it comes time next year, look what happened to Matt Barkley. Barkley was a top 5 pick, and he ended up being a 4th rounder when he went back to school. So you never know what happens in those college years, and it's impossible to sit here and judge a quarterback class a year out and say you can't address the position now because, I don't know, maybe the guy hasn't separated himself, It's just waiting year in and year out for the draft or to draft a quarterback will get people fired, no doubt.
So do you believe that there's any quarterback in this draft that is worthy of a top pick? Or do you think it's just no way anyone's rated higher than Myles Garrett?
Yeah, I think just based on how good Myles Garrett was at the combine and his showing off his athleticism and the things he can do on the football field versus some of the quarterbacks did some really good things during the combine, but none of them really separated themselves in terms of that overwhelming ability to separate themselves as that number one pick. So it made, and plus there's just so much talent at the top of the draft that it really kind of downplayed the quarterback position in terms of value. So all the GMs kind of have that same mindset right now that these quarterbacks are not really worthy of a first-round pick, and they all have one sort of major flaw that prevents them from being that pick. So it makes it easier on the Browns because if they were to pass up Myles Garrett for a quarterback, I mean, the backlash would be insane. So it just makes the Browns' decision that much easier to take.
And he's a guy who, no matter who's picking number one, he's going to go. He's going to be the number one pick. So
yep.
If he does end up not being a superstar, you can't fault the Browns for taking him because he wasn't some project pick or like taking a quarterback. He's a guy who's been rated the top picks, like basically all season.
Since last year. Like literally after the season ended in 2015, he was, or whatever. He's been the number one prospect since last year's draft. And even if you look at a guy like Jadeveon Clowney, I mean, Clowney didn't play well. He's been hurt for the last 2 years, and no one really considered him a bust. But I mean, there was a lot of question brought in. Like, no one was bashing the Texans for that, though. It was just kind of the players' fault. So,
but even he's turning it around now.
What happened with Myles Garrett? Oh yeah, he's a monster now. And now that he's healthy, man, he turns around that defense. And I look forward to Myles Garrett doing the same thing. The only caveat I see is if you think that guy, if there's a quarterback in the draft that you think is your guy, then you gotta take him. I mean, you can't guarantee that he's going to be there at 12. I think if he can change your franchise, you got to do it. But
they even have the ability to. I mean, every team does, but with that number 12 pick, there's teams in the top 10 who could be looking to trade out, such as the Jets, who have openly said that they're almost in a Brown situation where they're rebuilding, kind of slashing all their talent. If you're the Browns, I mean, you're working the phones. The Jets probably not going to take a rookie quarterback based on their current philosophy. They're probably not going to invest in a guy this year. Maybe take a guy in a later round to give him a chance. But
well, they've taken a quarterback every year for the last. I mean, they have Hackenberg, Petty. They just like Geno Smith and Fitzpatrick. But I mean, not to say that those guys are going to be the starters, but my theory is that they're going to trade up with Tennessee and just give back the second round pick that they got for. I mean, it's essentially the same amount of spots. So I don't know what other picks were given up aside from the second rounder this year, but I know that they moved up from 15 to 8 last year to take Jack Conklin, and now this year the Browns are going to move up, or hopefully move up from 12 to 5 in front of the Jets. Should maybe they fall in love with the quarterback during these pro days, interview processes. So you never know what's going to happen. I think the Browns should be active on the
and during the draft day. Teams aren't going to lie to you because they want the picks you have. So, I mean, they may say, like, exactly. We're about to take Trubisky, but the Browns might say, no, you're not. Like, you're absolutely not. Like, they want to help each other in the sense of if you have a higher pick, you'll tell the truth to be like, hey, we're going to give you this pick. Because if we don't take him, the next team's they called us. So There's probably a bit of lying
Well, what's the
involved
point
now
in-
that I really think about it because it's NFL GMs.
Well, I think it's lying in terms of interest level. So it's like, so say the Browns call it the Jets. The Jets are like, oh, we love Trubisky. We're gonna take him. But like the Browns, everything so far out of New York.
Yeah,
is
so the
that they
Browns
wanna
know.
trade out of that pick because they're just doing the same thing the Browns are doing. Yeah, and there's a general sense around the league that these quarterbacks really aren't worth taking in the top 15, 20 picks. So even at number 12, I think the likelihood for the Browns of getting one of those guys is good. I still don't think that they're going to even take one, which is crazy to me. But just the general sense from my perspective and the hype that usually surrounds quarterbacks at this time just isn't there for these guys. So I mean, if you're taking a look at 12 and you're the Browns, if I see a guy drop like Solomon Thomas to right before the I would try and trade up right before that Bengals pick and just get another defensive stud if one of those quarterbacks doesn't come out and separate themselves. I think Browns could have an opportunity to get 2 studs in the first.
So right now, with that mindset of they're not going to take a guy top 12, take a quarterback, do you think Cody Kessler is the favorite to be the starter to open the season next year?
Is this discounting a trade for Jimmy Garoppolo that I think is going to happen?
Yes. As of right now.
Yeah, I would say Kessler.
Is he the favorite?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, what is it, process of elimination? I mean, he's the only one left. So I think, again, I think Kessler does some good things, but I think a lot of people are making him out to be something that he's not. A lot of these quarterbacks take a lot of time to develop, and I think Kessler is one of those guys. I don't think he could really step in right now. I think he played better. I mean, like I said before, he led them through perhaps their best stretch of football last year. I just think it's one of those things where a lot of people, because of the limited quarterback hype or like the uncertainty surrounding all these quarterbacks, I think there's a lot of hyping up of their own guys just to put themselves at ease for this next year.
And isn't it weird, just from a fan point of view, how during the season everyone wants Kessler in because, I mean, it was process of elimination, but RG3 is doing its bad. It's going, why aren't we playing Kessler? Like what? I know he was dealing with some injuries, but so why aren't we playing him? Why aren't we playing him? Season ends immediately. Kessler is not qualified to be the starter.
Career backup.
Like, were you lying to yourself? Like for months? He was thrust in there in week 3, wasn't ready, played solid. If he had a whole off season, he could probably make the team a little better than 1-15, given they're going to have all this talent coming in.
Yeah, he's going to be better, I think. He's going to be a better quarterback just due to being in his system for another year, working out in the offseason, knowing the playbook. I mean, he's one of those guys that's coming into the facility early. He's leaving late. So I think he's obviously going to get better, and they should definitely keep him on the roster. But to say that the quarterback position is good right now or content that the Browns are not going to address it in some capacity this year is absurd. I think there's got to be – whether it's like a guy like Nathan Peterman in the 3rd round, Davis Webb. I think Davis Webb's a guy that's hyping up or getting hyped up a lot more because of his size and the fact that Hugh Jackson played with him in the Senior Bowl. I don't know too much about him, but he loved Jared Goff last year in that same sort of offense. And it's just one of those things where it may not be one of those top 3 guys, but I wouldn't be surprised if they take a guy in the 2nd round or even at that 33 pick being one of those quarterbacks.
Yeah, that's a very likely possibility. There's always, every year, there's the 2 or 3, biggest hype guys, but maybe Hugh Jackson and Sashi Brown say, no, these are not the best prospects. This is just what the media is saying. And they're just kind of the most hyped. There could be a guy who they're seeing that's just as qualified, just didn't play, just wasn't such a high-profile prospect all year.
Yeah, I heard Greg Cosell yesterday on the radio talking about how none of these prospects are really like that one-size-fits-all, that a lot of them are based on like what the coach is. It's like in the eye of the beholder, like what the coach sees in quarterbacks and how each quarterback fits their system and runs their offense. So, and a guy like Hugh Jackson takes that very seriously. So I think you have to look a lot, and I think Jimmy Garoppolo fits that mold perfectly. I think just a quick release, compact. I mean, similar to Andy Dalton in the sense that he's not going to go out and throw for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns, but he's going to go and throw for close to 300, 2 touchdowns.
He's going to move the ball down the field.
Exactly, and I don't care. You could be Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, that's great, but just get me a guy that's going to move the ball down the field, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, there was far too many predictable 3-and-outs last year, as in most years with the Browns. But even Josh McCown can move the ball down the field. They just need a guy who's consistently going to move the chain, stay healthy. And it sounds so basic, move the ball down the field, but just a guy who's going to complete short passes, who can just not get sacked when there is good protection, just, get himself sacked. And like you said, Garoppolo is a guy like that. I guess for now it just depends on the cost, and that's going to be the main hanging point, maybe even until draft night.
Yeah, would you I mean, as the draft comes closer, too, all those picks get more and more valuable because the draft boards get more set. You get more exposure to these players and the hype. Or you can envision more of what type of player you're getting at that spot as the draft comes closer. So if the Patriots fall in love with a guy that could be there in the top of the second round, I mean, what's to say that they don't want that pick just so they can get that guy? It's one of those things where you look at now the Patriots don't have any draft picks in the first 3 rounds, so why not? It's almost connecting the dots again on stuff like that because the Browns have so many picks and the Patriots really have none. So it just makes sense from a lot of different areas, and as the draft gets closer, those picks only become more valuable. What do you make of the whole Isaiah Crowell second-round tender? Would you trade Isaiah Crowell for? I mean, first of all, the teams that are inquiring about Isaiah Crowell, I think, are absolutely crazy. He's a good player, but to trade a second-round pick and sign him to a contract, I think is dumb. Honestly, I mean, you can.
I would not trade him personally. I think keeping him. I mean, unless someone gives some insane offer. That's just like, okay, we're not touching that. But if it's just on market value for the current running backs, I'd keep him. I think keeping him another year along with Duke Johnson back there, kind of building a good thing, and maybe we'll see how he does with some better blocking.
I agree. I think Isaiah Crowell for a good portion of the year, or at least for the first 5 weeks, was one of the top rushers in the NFL. So I think that the ability is there, but if a team's going to come out and say that they want Isaiah Crowell for, I don't know, I'd assume $3 million a year, I think that might be what what's the tender, 1 point something, 1.2, or do you know?
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Yeah, me either. So either way, let's say it's $1.5 million. If a team's going to come in and say, hey, we're going to sign this guy for $3 million a year for 4 years, I believe that's similar to what Miami signed Ronnie Hillman for. I think if you're the Browns, you take that second-round pick, no doubt. Then it gives you the ability to imagine if you had Leonard Fournette or Dalvin Cook plus Duke Johnson behind that new offensive line. I mean, if you're the Browns, I think that's a feasible scenario. If you're going to trade Isaiah Crowell for a number 2 pick, I think you've got to target Fournette or Dalvin Cook at 12.
Well, yeah, it all depends how the front office is currently evaluating those 2 guys and even the other backs in the draft.
It's like a legendary running back class from what I hear. So why not take a stab? I get that Hugh loves Isaiah Crowell, and like I just said about 15 minutes ago, I'm a huge proponent of the known commodity. But I mean, I don't know.
It's a little different with running backs though. When you have a size like Fournette, I know people might say, well, what about Trent Richardson? But he wasn't there was a lot of people who said Trent Richardson was bad.
Jim Brown being one of them.
Yes. He just looked at tape and was like, this guy's no good. But you look at a guy like Fournette, it's almost his size and speed. It's almost tough to think he's going to fail miserably.
Yeah. I mean, did people think about that about Zeke last year? I mean, Zeke stepped into – people want to use the build the line and build the line argument. I mean, why not put a guy back there? Isaiah Crowell is a threat to an extent, but he's not a guy that you're really game planning for, you know? You put a guy like Fournette back there with that size and speed, I mean, that's a guy that you have to stack the box. What bet if you do roll with Kessler or a rookie quarterback, doesn't that make your offense so much better because you give the defense a guy to fear aside from your quarterback, you know? It's not only do they have to worry about what the quarterback's going to do, but they have to fear what Fournette's going to do in the backfield too. I mean, with Crowell, I think it's just a little predictable because the Browns really just haven't had success in the running game or as much success as they'd like to have, at least last season. And
it gives the Browns, they don't have to panic if they're down 10 or 14 and immediately start chucking the ball downfield. They say, we have a solid running back we're going to move they're going to know we're running the ball, but we're still going to move it downfield. And think of backs like Marshawn Lynch. Teams know they're going to run the ball.
Yeah.
But it doesn't
and they
matter.
Still can't stop it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can. Adrian Peterson, perfect example. I mean, how many teams in his prime did teams stack the box and he still ran through them like it was butter. I mean, I get that running backs are a dime a dozen in terms of just finding a guy. Like a 1,000-yard running back really doesn't mean anything now. I mean, over a 16-game season, that's pretty easy to do given kind of the way running backs are used now. I think if you can find one of those elite guys, even if the shelf life isn't that long, you're getting a guy for 6-7 years. That's just an absolute stud. Something the Browns haven't had for so long, and I think people just get so caught up, and every draft pick they want these guys to be there for 11 years or like Larry Fitzgerald to spend their whole career here. But just at some point, I don't even care if the guy's here for 3 years. Give me some elite talent for just a brief period of time to get my hopes up again.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't hurt to take Fournette or Cook or even any when they evaluate highly. Like you said, it's just it changes the dynamic of the offense, and I think we've been kind of beaten down by watching the running game the past few years. Really since Peyton Hillis left, there's been no dominant running back.
Yeah, and I like Duke Johnson a lot. I think Duke Johnson.
Well, he's kind of almost better as a skill. It's kind of a skill player, pass catcher, do it all.
Yeah, I think that's very valuable in the backfield. But I mean, even if he was riffing off, what was he? I think he averaged 5 yards a carry too. I mean,
they had really great numbers last year when they ran the ball. It was just that they never got to because they were so bad. They were always losing.
Yeah, I think that'll change this year, especially behind the new offensive line. So, fingers crossed that everyone stays healthy, and that's a new aspect.
And you're going to have a better
offense.
defense, so you're not going to be starting on the 10-yard line every time. The field position is something that the Browns were horrible at last year, and a lot of people forget about that. Say, why'd they throw the ball so much? Well, if you're starting on the 5-yard line and you're down 14 points, you can't be like, we're going to establish a run game.
Yeah, so it's a field position is definitely important. I mean, I think Bill Belichick called Johnny Hecker, like, who's the punter for the Rams, like a crazy weapon. You know, like, isn't that so crazy that a punter could be considered a weapon? But
makes them feel better about their jobs.
That's true, but I mean, if you could put a team inside the 10-yard line, you just change their whole. Look at you have a team that's starting at the 35-yard line versus
game plan changes.
5. Exactly, you're going to run the ball. I mean, in Madden, I know I run the ball in the red zone or when I'm backed up like that because I don't want a safety, and I can only imagine that unless you're the Falcons, Packers, or Patriots, you're generally going to have that same ideology. So, I don't know. I think having field position is very, very important and controlling the clock, too, because how many times last year did the Browns come out either in the first quarter or second half?
Minute-long 3-and-outs.
Yeah. So, that does nothing for your defense. It only makes it worse.
And you punt, and they're on the 50.
Yeah. And speaking of defense, I think drafting Myles Garrett just really helps not only your defensive line and Emmanuel Ogbah, because you're putting him, I assume, on the right tackle, but it's helping out guys like Danny Shelton. Like, Danny Shelton can take up 2 blockers, so you're almost getting one-on-one on the outside. Ogbah played well by himself, basically, on that line. You put a threat on Myles Garrett on the other side. Not only that helps your cornerbacks immensely.
And then you have a linebacker shoot through the line.
Exactly. I think that's really what Pettin and his staff tried to do was get that dominant front 7 and be able to then play defense in the secondary and have that ball-hawking ability because you're able to put enough pressure on the quarterback to change. Like, once they hit their back foot, they're rushing their throw or they're not comfortable in the pocket. So if you can disrupt the quarterback like that, I think it causes a lot more turnovers for the Browns that will ultimately help the team as a whole.
Yeah, getting Garrett, we said it several times, no-brainer, makes a team.
I watch his combine tape every once in a while just because, like...
Just lonely great. At home, it's watching some Myles Garrett combine tape.
41-inch vertical.
Yeah, that was his combine. I know sometimes people say, you can't look too much in the combine numbers. His combine was insane.
I don't like combine numbers. I pay attention to specific things like defensive linemen, offensive linemen. I'm only concerned about how many reps they put up on the bench. Like cornerbacks or running backs, skill positions like that. What's your 40 time, your 3-yard, or your cone, your shuttle? What are those numbers? Because that's gonna show me what your agility is like, your acceleration, stuff like that. Like quarterbacks, I don't care about your 40 time. I could honestly care. Mitch could have run a 10-second 40, and I'd have been like, fine, good. I don't care. quarterbacks are not supposed to run like Robert Griffin III. Like it doesn't matter. It's nice to have, but I'd rather you be able to dissect a defense and know what coverages pre-snap you're looking at, or be able to take a play off a board or off your wristband and be able to spit it back in a huddle and not falter and be confident in your huddle and command the huddle and be that type of quarterback that the Browns need.
Yeah, and Garrett, it wasn't so much that his combine made him the number one pick; it just validated his position as the number one pick.
Easily.
So yeah, there was no. Well, Garrett ran a whatever 40. He's the number one pick. It was this guy who's going to be the number one pick just proved that he's an absolute athletic freak.
Yeah, I saw a tweet that was just right after the combine. That was, I don't know who it was from, but it was like the San Francisco 49ers are now on the clock. Like it was just it's a no-brainer for the Browns to take him. And
no, it's
I'm happy
if they don't.
There's gonna be it's gonna be awesome.
I was gonna say if they don't, it's gonna be the ultimate WWE shock reveal.
First pick in the NFL draft, the Cleveland Browns select Nathan Peterman.
We just really evaluated him as the top quarterback, and we thought someone was going to take him after us.
Or someone with like a 6th round grade. You're like, oh my.
I think Mel Kiper would have a heart attack, and he'd his wires would short circuit.
So do you think that how would the fan base react?
How would the fan base react if they took?
No, listen. It's actually a pretty good scenario. So say they don't take Myles Garrett, but they take like Malik Hooker.
Oh, well, Ohio State guy, everyone's going to freak out and be excited.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, I think Malik Hooker I think he's number 2 right behind Myles Garrett in this draft and players that I want.
We think most Browns fans are told Myles Garrett's the best pick. So without doing any research, they say he's the best pick. So I think if it's anyone but Garrett, people are going to freak out.
Everyone says so it must be true, And if you have differing opinions,
you're a fool.
It's blasphemy.
Well, a good life lesson, anytime you express any opinion, people are going to lash out at it, which is the beauty of writing for a Browns blog. Always nice to see those friendly remarks. Let me check my comment inbox. Oh, wow. Look at that. That's terrifying.
That's the thing about Twitter nowadays.
It's harsh.
You can literally choose everything you want to see, whether it's like...
That's the news in general, too, not to get on a soapbox here, but...
No, it's true. You can choose what you want to see, and if you don't like someone's opinion, you can literally not look at what they have to say. So, I think people get caught up in not respecting other people's opinions or just not.
They surround themselves with their own views, and then when someone expresses it, they're so already ingrained. They say, "How could we not take Garrett? This guy said this, and this guy said this. Well, what about all the other guys who are saying other stuff?" It's all opinion based.
Yeah, and I'm not saying don't draft Myles Garrett, but I'm saying if there's another guy that. Like, say who has 2 really good pass? So if you're the Texans and you have the first pick, like, are you drafting Myles Garrett when you have Jadeveon Clowney and J.J. Watt? No, you're going to draft, I don't know, Malik Hooker or quarterback or something. You're going to draft someone else. So, I mean, it just happens to be that the Browns have a need at defensive end. But, I mean, it's not to say that there's other guys not worthy of that number 1 pick either.
No, exactly. I think it's just the fact that the Browns have a need everywhere, essentially. So they just need to take the best overall player. And right now, that's Garrett.
I agree.
And to kind of wrap things up here, I want to do, because we're going to be talking Garrett a lot over the next 6 weeks, but I want to do my
Are we going to do the win total of what the Browns...
favorite segment.
I was going to say the prediction.
Let me get to it. What is your prediction for the final record based on the current roster? You could even add Brock in there if you want. Current roster after free agency. Final record.
All right. Can we get a recap of what we've done? I'm sorry if I cut you off before that, but let's do a recap of. So with Jimmy, I believe it was. What was my? I think it was 8.
It was 8 and 8.
8 maybe. No, it was. Yeah,
Kirk
it was
on our scrapped Kirk podcast. I believe you said 10 and 6. That never went to air.
I did. Rest in peace, that podcast. That was a good one too.
I'm waiting for the Browns to trade for
so
Kirk
10 and 6
right now, and we're gonna have to scrap it.
Yep. Or like Myles Garrett,
he retires.
Does something terrible, and then says I don't want to go to the Browns. Then we got to reshoot.
That'd be insane.
I mean, current roster. Are you saying quarterback position staying the same? Or,
it's just who's on the team right now.
So no Myles Garrett.
Nope.
Just.
You know what? Throw Garrett in. Because we're going to assume he's going to be a Brown.
3. 3-13.
Ooh, wow.
5 wins, maybe. I think, yeah, you built the offensive line, but you still really have no answer at quarterback. And I'm not I'm not hopeful that Brock Osweiler has anything for you to provide in terms of quarterback play. So
3-13. Let me write that down.
I think you're able to run the ball a little bit better, but on defense you're not much better. On offensive, the only thing you've really done is solidify your offensive line. So, and you've lost Terrelle Pryor in that aspect.
Well, I hope that in the coming weeks and after the draft, you finally get back to your optimistic ways of saying the Browns are going to go 12-4.
I know. Give me some more quarterback. Trust me. You put a quarterback.
You put a quarterback in front of me, I'll tell you they're going to go to the Super Bowl.
4 or 5 more wins guaranteed. What's the thing? The Eagles had just as little talent on their team, and Carson Wentz led them to 7 wins. It's amazing just what a quarterback does to your franchise that the Browns have not had for so freaking long. And before I get off on another tangent.
And now the Browns need the draft. That's good.
like an Alex Jones.
All right, hour 5 is going to touch on 7th round quarterback prospects. But no, we will wrap it up there with your 3-13 / maybe 5 prediction. That is it for episode 3. And make sure we are going to be on iTunes. Andrew, are you an iTunes guy? Are you excited about this?
I'm more of a Spotify guy, but I will re-download iTunes just to get more views on this podcast.
Just to listen to yourself on your long car rides.
Exactly. That's
as a candy salesman.
Yep. Like the Wonka man.
So we are going to be on iTunes. Tell your friends. Tell your angry coworkers who have their harsh Browns opinions.
Family, tell all the Steeler fans you know, everyone that loves Jimmy Garoppolo, everyone that
tell Myles Garrett.
To the draft. Post it, make flyers for us. Post it in your neighborhoods like a lost dog.
Play it uncomfortably loud at work, like Milton in Office Space, and be like, "I am allowed to listen to the Dog Pun Daily podcast."
If you're in college, post it on the whiteboards and in
Ooh,
every
those
classroom.
are fun. Those are fun.
Do what you got to do. We're gonna people should listen. We're a good time.
That's not only our closing, but our speed dating strategy. And that is all. Andrew, thank you once again for your optimistic opinions about the Browns and what they're going to do this year. And that is all for us. Thank you for listening.